It's movie time with John DeSando and his friends online. So everything is gonna be just fine. From the top down to the bottom. He's gonna let you know if you should stay home or if you should go. Might even yell if it's a spectacle. From San Francisco to Long Island. 'Cause nothing's
It's
better
Movie
than
Time,
emotion
produced and
video.
hosted by John DeSando. Listen to shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org.
I'm John DeSando,
And I'm Mary Yerina.
and this is It's Movie Time. Mary, one of the most delightful times I had by myself traveling was going to Weymouth in the Dorset section
Yes.
of England and sitting by the seaside and just enjoying the typical, experience. And I didn't even know anything about Littlehampton, which
And
is in
now
Sussex,
you do.
and boy do I now. Now there's a film out there that only you and I would be reviewing. I'll bet there's nobody else in the country that's doing this one. Wicked Little Letters. Set it up for me.
So this takes place, as John said, in Littlehampton, Sussex, England, in 1920.
You're right.
So we are post the Great War. There's been, as a result, great changes in society, including the use of less genteel language coming
Right.
out of the war, and more immigrants settling in the port towns of Great Britain. And so we have these two neighbors, Edith and Rose, who, when Rose moves in, initially become friends, but then they have a falling out that leads to Edith receiving poison pen letters that
No, Mary, it sounds like you're indicting Rose here.
they are believed to be from Rose.
She has a good potty mouth, so
She does. She's an Irish immigrant portrayed by Jessie Buckley, and she is a woman before her time in terms of her independence and use of colorful language.
And then let me interject here that we're somewhere in the suffragette movement, are we?
We are. This is at the time where the suffragettes are beginning to gather steam politically in the UK, and so again, there's this period. This decade of the 1920s was a period of upheaval coming out of the war, and with the women's suffragette movement and immigration and all of those things. So there's a lot of change happening in society, and Edith and her family,
Played by Olivia Colman. This
Yes.
woman can do anything. But play Dowdy, she really can.
yes, and so Edith's family is much more of the old school, cut from the old cloth,
You
very
think?
prim, very proper, at least in terms of appearances. And her parents are played by Timothy Spall and Gemma Jones.
Yeah, and Timothy Spall is one of my favorite. I learned about him through Mike Lee's movies, and
I learned about him through the Harry Potter movies.
Oh, right, thank you. Yeah, I forgot about that. He's just a guy you would never think would be such a fine actor. But in this one, he's completely objectionable. I mean, he is nothing endearing about his dad.
In fact, it's somewhat one note.
Yeah, you think, right?
But he turns out to be a very oppressive,
Oh, my.
short-tempered, abusive father.
Yeah, he is maybe an over-the-top emblem of the paternalistic society that these poor women had to put up with. Good Lord. Thank God for the women in town who don't quite believe that Rose will be the one who's sending the letter.
Yeah, it's actually a funny portrayal of the subculture of Edith's and Rose's friends and their
Yes.
true nature
Yes.
of banding together and wanting to protect their friends, but also you sense that it's their way of breaking out of the post-Victorian era, but still very restrictive
Yes.
society as it relates to women.
You know, as we're describing it, as you are so carefully describing it, someone who hadn't seen the movie, didn't know much about the movie, would think it was loaded thematically with all of these high-end topics. And I don't think it is at all, do you?
Well, I actually felt, if you watch the trailer, you get the sense that the film is about these constant hijinks of who wrote the letters and
Right.
who's receiving the letters and what the letters say. And in fact, there are long stretches where a lot of serious themes are introduced that aren't necessarily resolved. I've mentioned the abusive father.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the suffragette movement at the time, but there's also the role of women. We have a woman police constable,
Right.
Gladys Moss.
And they call it, she's a WPO.
Yes.
And they call her that. They don't call her by her name.
Yeah.
She's a woman police officer.
Woman police officer.
And a very good role.
Yes, a very good role. And but the whole issue of women in the workplace and being abused in the workplace and disrespected in the workplace is brought up. Women having children out of wedlock is brought up. So there's a lot of themes that are very, continue to this day that are relevant in contemporary society.
Yes.
What wasn't relevant was the language in the letters. A lot of it, other than if you're sensitive to F-bombs, do not see this
Oh,
film.
yeah, right.
But,
Mary, I've got 3 pages.
Of F-bombs?
And I thought maybe when we get to our podcast, I might do a few, and I'll, of course, blank out particularly the F-bombs.
But there were words that we wouldn't consider to be curse words today. And in fact, in an interview with the director, Thea Sharrock, she actually said that about 80% of the letters are the true letters that were written. And so we're actually hearing from the era the letters that were written, which were actually kind of funny. And the bigger theme, I thought, was, this took place in an era where you had to physically write a letter, put it in an envelope, address it, put a stamp on it, and mail it. And we have poison pen, if you will, still in our culture today, and it's more ubiquitous and more anonymous because it can happen digitally now, and it can spread like wildfire now. And this was a small seaside village where, because of how closely people lived together and how everything was everybody else's business and it was hard to keep secrets, all of, who's receiving letters and what they say and the accusations in them are all, everybody knows about it as well in this small town, even without the digital technology we have today. So I did think there were big themes.
Well, they were, and there's so many, as you described them, that it really doesn't concentrate on anyone in particular, other than I think the role of women. But that mentioning that calligraphy, they couldn't use it in the legal sense, that they couldn't bring in penmanship.
No,
which would seem to me and to us the first thing you do.
Right, and handwriting analysis.
Yeah.
They couldn't compare any handwriting.
Yeah.
In the court case.
Which, though, eventually becomes a part of the story, doesn't it?
It did, but what actually happens is the use of invisible ink, and that really did happen in the real Little Hampton letter scandal.
That's great, yes.
So they did borrow heavily from what really happened, including the resolution.
Yes.
But certainly in any dramatic interpretation, liberties were taken.
Yeah. And for me, and I'm not a swearer, now and then I have a swear word or so on, and I'm not particularly fond of swearing here, but I did find it intriguing. Johnny Sweets, the writer here,
yes.
And I found some of it ingenious. It makes it even better when Olivia Colman eventually does it.
Yeah.
Because she just does not appear to be anybody who
It's actually a very funny scene that I think you're referring to is when, so Edith and Rose have had a falling out. These poison pen letters are, originally targeting Edith and her family. They spread to targeting other people in the community, and Rose is the prime suspect, if you will. And they actually confront each other on the street, and Rose criticizes Edith's level of cursing. and Edith says, well, how would you say it? And so Rose responds how she would say it, and then Edith responds in kind, and Rose compliments her that was much better.
Yes.
It's a very, very funny, charming scene.
Well, although there's not much that's subtle here, one of the subtler parts of this film that I really like was the relationship between the two of them. They're next door neighbors. And anybody who has a next door neighbor knows that that's a very delicate situation.
Well, and in this case, and it was true in Little Hampton, is they live in really small apartments that are literally, there is no space just
Right.
except a wall.
Right.
Row upon row upon row of
Yes,
neighbors.
yes.
And they have to share a literal galvanized bathtub back and forth to take a bath. In real life, they had a common garden, which apparently is where the falling out in their friendship actually occurred. So they have to share a lot of resources, an outhouse, to live in these circumstances. So yeah, it's very hard to have privacy in this type of situation.
All right, Mary Yerina, I think that people are going to want to go to the podcast experience, to Back Talk, to hear more about what we have to say. In fact, I think we'll bring in a few of the famous British comedies, or at least ones that I'm thinking of and you might think of. But right now, it's Wicked Little Letters. And Mary, what do you recommend?
It is, although I felt it underachieved
Okay.
from my expectations, it is an enjoyable trip to the theater.
Yeah, and if you can't afford the airline ticket to get over there, there's a touch of Brit in this that's always enjoyable. And the Brits are eccentric, regardless of whether they're on film or not.
With John DeSando and his friends online. So everything is gonna be just fine. From the top down to the bottom. He's gonna let you know